A few weeks back, footage was sent in to us by a viewer, and he claims now that this footage was shot in Dublin on New Year's Day. Now we're going to roll it for you there with a bit of spooky music, and you guys at home can make up your own minds. Tell us what you think.
On the face of it, at least, it appears very dramatic. And now here to explain more about the prevalence of UFOs and their own experiences of them are Carl Nally of the UFO and Paranormal Research Ireland and Betty Meyler, the President of UFO Society of Ireland. You're both very welcome this morning.
Thank you, Brian.
What do you think of that footage now we've just shown? First you, Carl.
My colleague rang me last night in relation, now I don't know whether it's this footage or not, but footage that was shown allegedly over the Liffey, flying up to Liffey on New Year's Day. If this is the same footage, it's a fake, and it was airbrushed out, the buildings behind it, and that's why it may, and it could be wrong. I'll have to check that, but I'll check it this week, so I'll have to hold back my opinion on that until I check it out.
Would you be very good now, Carl, at detecting what was a fake and what was real at this point? Because, I mean, you must get footage sent to you all the time.
Yeah, and it's getting harder, and it's getting harder because technology in relation to fake footage is really top class.
It's easier to make it up and to make fakes appear realistic, I suppose.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we have a friend of ours who has the special equipment needed, so if we get footage sent to us, we'll send it on to him and get his opinion.
And Betty, is that always the problem? People, the minute I see that, you know, the initial reaction is to be sceptical about it and to have your doubt and say we can explain it away some way.
It is, but I'll just give you an example. 31st of December last year, there was a man in Drogheda and they were watching the fireworks. They were out in the garden. The whole of Drogheda was out there watching the fireworks. And above the fireworks, he saw these two white lights going in formation. And they were going very, very slowly. And then suddenly a third one came and joined them. He thought that was very strange, and he sent me a picture of that. He went in to get his camera, and then he saw another two flying in formation, and another one coming suddenly. Now, this is an ordinary man. He wouldn't be fooling around. He was genuinely watching the fireworks. That's what he went out for. He wasn't watching for UFOs. But when two lights go in formation together, it's not a satellite. It's not an International Space Station. It's not a meteor. What else could it be? The other day I was on a radio station and somebody had seen this big red ball going through the sky. And they approached Astronomy Ireland. And Astronomy Ireland said it was a fireball. Could very well have been a fireball. I won't discount that. I wouldn't go against Astronomy Ireland because they're more scientific than I am. But apparently this is in the Sligo area and the ball sort of disappeared like into the sea of Sligo. So I just take everything with a pinch of salt. But when you get proof that you see lights travelling together, in formation, this is the thing. Sometimes they're two in formation with a third one following. Sometimes they're three in formation.
Given the night that was in it, you're satisfied that you can discount the fact that it could have been part of a fireworks display or something like that?
He said it definitely wasn't part of a fireworks. He would know, because a fireworks display only goes that far. Yeah. These were really high up in the sky.
And they stayed in the sky, presumably,
and the other thing, Matt, no noise. Yeah. And this is a common factor of all sightings, that there's never any noise.
Betty, there's plenty of believers out there, isn't there? I mean, you've got, in the UFO Society of Ireland, you've about 60 members.
60 members, yes. And we're only a small society.
And it's growing all the time, because I know you hold seminars and conferences and...
Yeah. And I've had 6 international conferences so far, and I get speakers from America, Canada, Australia, Turkey, Brazil, all over the place. So it's become to be a very well-known conference
Yeah.
and a very highly thought-of conference. That's the other important point. And these are all people who are very highly thought of in their own sphere, in their own countries. And the fact that they are bothered to make the journey to oil.
So tell us about Ireland then, Betty, as a location for sightings. You know, when you think of sightings, you think, you know, the deserts of America, South America, those type of places. You know, have we had our share of these sightings here in Ireland?
Well, I think so, and I think we've had them all the time, but it's only recently they've been reported. Because people know me now, I'm fairly well known. Carl is fairly well known, so they know who to report to whenever they see anything. Now, the other thing is, what we are told is that these UFOs travel along ley lines. Now, ley lines are lines of magnetic energy that go through the Earth. The little swallows from South Africa travel along them. They can sense them, and they come to your barn in the summer. The whales travel along them in the ocean. Well, they've got no walkways to go there. That's how they travel. Yeah. They sense them. So we're told that the UFOs travel along ley lines for a start.
And would that explain the sometimes sudden change of direction or change of movement?
Yes, could be. And the other thing is that they use megalithic sites, like Newgrange, Carramore, all the different megalithic. There are hundreds of megalithic sites around Ireland. And they use this as beacons to guide them on their way, which would make sense to me anyway.
And is that the whole thing about that the energy around the likes of Newgrange, which we have on screen there, is quite strong, so that it may attract any sort of paranormal or UFO activity?
That is correct, that is correct. But see, the main thing is, I think, why they're more reported now is because people know me fairly well, and they know Carl very well.
I suppose that presumably as well, they also now have the technology to capture it. Before, you saw something in the sky walking home, I'm not going to say anything because people will laugh at it, but now you have a mobile phone, you can instantly capture it.
Yes. I can remember talking to an old lady who since died. She was 95, and she told me that when she was 5 or 6 years of age, in my area, Lochgara, she saw these lights coming out of the lake, and when she went home and told her mother said, "Oh, no, don't tell anybody about that. They're the souls of people who have died and are going to heaven."
Yeah.
Because that's the only way they could explain it 80, 90 years ago, you know. Now we've moved on to a different dimension.
Well, Carl, you brought us in some footage today, and you're very excited about this footage. You said it was taken by a retired detective, was it?
No, it was taken by a senior detective from Portlaoise on his way through Dunboyne.
Okay, well, we roll it there, and you could describe what exactly we're seeing, okay?
Okay, this first part what we're looking at here, in actual fact, was taken by a pilot out in Howth, who was out in Howth photographing the weather. You see, okay, I'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay, this is what we're talking about, sorry.
Okay.
So we see
now, what you see here,
sky.
what you see here now, he got out of his car and you can see the beam shooting down there from the top right-hand position. What happened was there were 3 of these objects flying in a northwest direction. And he was driving along in his car through Dunboyne and had a sense in the mind to actually get out of his car, take out his mobile phone and take a snip, I think it was about 15 seconds, this is altogether, of this triangular-shaped UFO, shooting the beam down to the earth, as you can see. And then what happened was, after it finished revolving, it followed the other 2 up in the northwest direction. But he's very, very lucky to get that. Only a few days later, we had more footage from Manchester, we had footage from Turkey, we had footage from Germany, which showed the same type of triangular-shaped object firing a multitude of beams down.
So you think that's the spaceship beaming down to Earth?
It's some kind of a craft. You can see that the 3 points of light rotate in unison, presupposing that it's a solid craft. Because the triangular-shaped objects which have been seen since the late 80s and 90s, especially in the Belgium flap, this is a much sought-after clip by researchers who are really involved in the triangular-shaped objects. But you can actually see that it's actually shooting down a beam from the craft. Now, people might look at this and say, look, that's just 3 dots.
Yeah, I'd look at that and
I
go, that's some class of flashlight or I don't know what.
And the fact we were just talking about it earlier, there's some of us that were looking at it said there's no other objects that you can see. You can't see the sort of silhouette of the horizon.
When he got out of his car using his mobile phone, he was at possibly this angle, probably about 60 degrees, and there was a jet black sky. He had the presence of mind to use his mobile phone. He cut he's a trained observer. I mean, skeptics are always saying to us, look, give us some information, give us some photographs, give us something from trained observers. Well, I mean, the guy is a senior detective who, as I say, had the presence of mind to go out and take that shot. Only a short time later, in Manchester, Germany, Turkey, we had very, very similar, which can be seen on YouTube, by the way, very similar objects shooting down a multitude of beams. Those 3 dots presuppose that it's a solid object turning, and then follow the other 2 objects up in the northwest direction. And he actually, in the first place, had observed these 3 objects. 2 days later, a husband and wife are coming from Maynooth, passing through Dunboyne at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we have their signed affidavit. They looked up and they seen this giant ship as well, craft like this, triangle-shaped object, with a diamond-shaped object following through, only about 200 feet above their car.
A ship? What do you mean a ship? Just the same triangular shape, the 3 lights?
Yeah, and a diamond-shaped craft following behind it. And she was hysterical in the car, but the husband wanted to get out and do the same thing and use his mobile phone to take some footage, which is a pity that didn't happen. And she was terrified, but that was the same thing 2 days later in roughly the same area.
Carl, have you ever seen anything yourself? I mean, you've written a book, you've taken lots of testimony from people. What have you seen?
Well, what started me off on all this, of course, when I was about 12 or 13 years of age, I happened to observe these objects coming from the south direction at speed and turning west at speed. So they would come up from the south, about 20 of them in about 15 minutes. Come up from the south at speed, and at right angles turn west. There's no way possible, even in those days, even in these days, that it's possible for any kind of aircraft that we have to do manoeuvres like that. That manoeuvre defies the laws of physics as we know it.
But it's just so sharp and abrupt.
So sharp and abrupt, it'll kill a terrestrial pilot. It's as simple as that. And you don't have anything, even in this point in time, with all the technology and the black projects, to have anything like that. So anyhow, that started me off on that way back then. And then, of course, superb books by Eric von Däniken, Go to the Gods, Was God an Astronaut, and then John A. Keel, Operation Trojan Horse. And I knew there was something, after seeing that night, I knew there was something there that defied explanation, but yet was with us. And ever since then, up to this point in time, I've been very fascinated by it.
Do you believe the Irish government is trying to cover anything up? Because I know there was an incident in the book you talk about in Boyle where there was all sorts of men in black driving in the middle of the night.
Well, it's much more complicated than that. You'd have to read the story to actually understand it. I know you've only had an overview and a few minutes to read it, but it goes much more detailed than that, and there's a lot of people involved in it, a lot of government departments involved in it as well, so it goes much deeper than that. Yes, of course, and the book is called Conspiracy of Silence, and the reason why it's called Conspiracy of Silence is because we had governments, we were dealing with governments as far away as America and Russia, France, with their air forces obtaining information on various aspects that we wanted to prove a case or disprove a case or whatever. We were always told, going up through the years, the UFOs don't exist, as simple as that. Now we have, since CNES of France began to release thousands of documents, hitherto classed top secret and above top secret, to start off for France. Now we have the British, the Ministry of Defence in England releasing and the Condoyne report, and then this year as well, thousands of files, previously above top secret and top secret, talking about the UFO phenomenon, where all along they had said that it didn't exist, and now we know it exists. We have a situation now, not many people know, that UFOs were discussed in Dáil Éireann in 1981 and 1984 in question and answers times. I think about 8 UFOs were discussed. People don't realise that the Vatican has a great interest in UFOs. In actual fact, Corrado Balducci, who was a very, very good friend of Pope John Paul II, said his interest came from the Vatican on UFOs, and that the Vatican had sent requests to the nuncios all around the globe to gather as much information that they can on UFOs and abductions, and to send all this information back to the Vatican for scrutiny.
Now you just mentioned abduction there. I just want to get onto that in a moment. But the whole question here, like UFOs, they still remain, as the name suggests, unidentified.
That's what we say in our book if you read it.
So what do you think they are? Do you think they're some sort of alien life force that's coming to visit us? Look,
the thing about it is this, that trained observers have actually reported these to us. For example, as I said earlier, you have commercial pilots, you have military pilots, you have astronomers, you have scientists, you have the Gardaí, you have the Army, the Air Corps, all have given us statements on the actual fact of their sightings of UFOs. Now, if you take just commercial pilots, for example, these are the people who fly us around the world on their holidays and business all the time. And if we can't believe them, who are we expected to believe? So we have to take some reports on face value.
Yeah.
Now, we have a list of departments that we contact every time that we get a report in, either to approve it or disapprove it. Now, as I say, skeptics are always screaming for experience from reports from trained observers. How better is a commercial pilot or an astronomer or an aircraft pilot?
I'm not disputing the fact that they've made these sightings and they've recorded them and that they're genuinely expressing the belief of what they've seen. But I'm just asking you, what you think. Can you give an explanation? What do you think the lights are or whatever?
Well, I would base my explanation on my experience over the past 25 years of dealing with the UFO phenomenon. And when I find that I can see radar readouts and printouts of a radar signature of a solid object in the sky that's stationary and had been there for, say, an hour, and takes off at a speed of 10,000 miles an hour and stop again dead, that leads me to believe that it's not technology that's earthly technology, but extraterrestrial technology. Now, I don't know where they come from. They could come from, researchers have probably the theory that they may come from the future, from deep in space, another galaxy in the universe, quite possible, or for a different dimension. You must remember that scientists, physicists who are involved in the Big Bang Theory need 11 dimensions to explain the Big Bang Theory. And if that's a fact, they're saying it's a fact, I'm not saying it's a fact. They're saying it's a fact, well, then we have 10 other realities living their lives the same as we're living them here. Some advanced, more advanced than us, some not so advanced.
Well, Betty, how many sightings do you get a year in your society? I mean, are you hearing reports all the time? Or
I'm hearing more and more and more now. Originally, there weren't that many. But more and more and more are hearing. When he talked about that crash, it was just outside the Curlew Mountains, just to have a little quick word about that, that's what got me into it to begin with. It was 1996, and there was an article in the Sunday World to say there'd been a crash in the Curlew Mountains outside Boyle, and 2 people came down, one from Dublin and one from Armagh, to investigate. Now, we do know that all the roads in that area were blocked off. There were Americans in black limousines, helicopter from Finnecamp came down, and it was big hush-hush all the time. And shortly after we started to, investigate and see what we could find out, the Garda Sergeant in Boyle came to me and says, Betty, says, keep away from that, it's got nothing to do with you. Now, you see, they wouldn't have said that if there wasn't something there, but the fact that the roads were blocked off and things, it makes me very suspicious.
So that was enough to spark your interest at Switch ever since?
Yes. What happened is I was talking to the townspeople, and so many people seem to have had experiences of some description that I thought we'd have a little organisation in Boyle, which is called the Western UFO Society. And that went on for a little while. But then I found people were embarrassed to be seen going up the stairs in a hotel to a UFO society. Because that's only for the weirdos, you see. So I had to sort of, think twice about that. And then, this is very interesting, in February 1998, I was interviewed by Women's Way. And I shared the front cover of Women's Way with no less a person than Robbie Williams. Yes, yes. And UFOs in Boyle. I had a 2-page spread. And as soon as that paper hit the newsstands, I got phone calls from every radio station in the country to say, what is all this about?
I've been putting up your details there
yes.
as well.
And that's why you set up the society.
That's why I set up the society.
Well, we wish you both the best of luck with it. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. You could talk about this for ages, but before we go, I have to say, I love Betty's shirt.
Yeah. Do you? I think I'll go off in it.
I think you could be beamed up in that one of these days. Thank you so much for coming on. Your details are on the screen. If anybody has any footage that they'd like to show us that they've taken, send it on in and we'll send it on to you guys as well.
Can I just say one thing before we finish, and it's this, that of all the hundreds of thousands of UFO reports and video footage that we sent in all over the years, hundreds of thousands of pieces, if just one is true, well then we're not alone.
Yeah. I suppose what you're saying is keep an open mind at least.
Yes,
absolutely.
The other thing I don't like is your word alien, because that means something apart. I prefer to call them extraterrestrials.
Okay. Thank you both so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having us. You're very good. Thank you.